In just 19 days, one man did something that hadn't happened in centuries. Not with force, not through scandal, but by walking barefoot, unlocking forbidden gates, and quietly rewriting the rules of power. His name is Pope Leo the Fourteenth, and what he's done has left bishops stunned, cardinals scrambling, and the world watching. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you believe faith still has the power to surprise us, and comment below where you're watching from. This story isn't just about the Vatican, it's about all of us. The first shock came just days after his election. Pope Leo issued an unprecedented decree. Every bishop, no matter their rank or location, must walk barefoot in at least one public procession each year. Not in a cathedral, not behind golden gates, but on the street, where children play, where addicts sleep, where everyday people live. At first, it sounded symbolic, until the story behind it emerged. Decades earlier, he was just Father Robert, a young missionary in Peru. One sweltering day in 1987, a barefoot child burst into his camp, begging for help. His sister was dying, and the local priest had vanished. The boy ran barefoot. The path to the village was brutal. Jagged rocks, sharp thorns. And still, the boy didn't slow down. Neither did Father Robert. He took off his shoes and followed. 2 agonizing miles later, feet bloodied and raw, he arrived. And an old woman, eyes full of disbelief, kissed his hand and said, "You came like us. Now we believe you." That one sentence changed his life. Ever since, he refused to wear shoes when the people around him couldn't. And now, as Pope, he's asking bishops to do the same. Not out of shame, but out of empathy. Not to suffer, but to understand. Some resisted, others were embarrassed. But Pope Leo didn't flinch. He knew what it meant. Leadership to him isn't about robes or rituals. It starts with bare feet on broken ground. And that was only the beginning. What he did next broke centuries of protocol and opened doors once bolted shut. The second change was even more unthinkable. Pope Leo opened the Vatican gardens, some of the most exclusive and protected land in the world, to the homeless. Every night, people without shelter are quietly ushered through centuries-old gates, given warm food, clean blankets, and a safe place to sleep beneath the trees. No cameras, no press, just dignity. For centuries, those gardens were reserved for popes, dignitaries, and carefully chosen guests. Now, they're a sanctuary for the forgotten. When Vatican officials questioned him, Pope Leo gave a simple answer. If the Garden of Eden was meant to be shared, then so should ours. That belief was born decades earlier, in the winter of 1979. Robert, then a theology student in Chicago, volunteered weekly at a soup kitchen. One freezing night, after locking up, he noticed an old man sitting alone on the church steps. No coat, no shoes, just newspapers wrapped around his legs. Robert sat beside him. Neither spoke. They just sat in silence as the wind howled. After what felt like hours, Robert stood to leave, and the man whispered, "Thank you for seeing me. Not for food, not for money, just for seeing him." That night etched itself into his soul, and now, as Pope Leo, he's making sure no one feels invisible, especially in the most sacred corners of the church. The third change was subtle, but it sent a powerful message. Pope Leo began dressing differently. Gone were the gilded robes, ornate crosses, and custom garments. Instead, he wore plain white vestments, simple, humble, and unadorned. When photographers tried to zoom in on his clothing, he waved them off. When asked why, his reply was crystal clear. People are hungry for truth, not fabric. This wasn't performative. It was a return to his roots. Back in the early 1980s, as a newly professed Augustinian friar, Robert lived simply. He served meals at the back of the hall and wore the same robe every day. No one knew his title, only his kindness. Years later, while visiting a remote parish, a young girl looked at his worn shoes and said, "You dress like our fathers. You must care like they do too." And that's what he's reminding the world now. Real power doesn't need to be worn like a crown. It's felt in how you live. The fourth change stirred quiet murmurs across the pews. Language. Pope Leo began introducing more inclusive phrasing into church prayers and liturgies. It wasn't a rewrite of doctrine. It wasn't an attempt to modernize the Bible. It was about making sure everyone felt seen. So, brothers became brothers and sisters. Gender-neutral terms quietly appeared in services across the world. Some praised it, others resisted. But when asked why, Pope Leo said, "God speaks to every heart. Our language should never block the sound of his voice." This came from years spent in dusty Peruvian villages between 1985 and 1994. Robert served among people who spoke different languages, followed different customs, and bore stories that had never been heard. He noticed something troubling. Certain prayers never mentioned women, never included the outsiders, never made space for the unheard. One Sunday, after Mass beneath a tree, an elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "I finally heard myself in the prayer today," she whispered. "Thank you." To Pope Leo, that moment was sacred, because sometimes the smallest change opens the biggest door. Then came the Green Vatican Initiative. Pope Leo announced that Vatican City would strive to become fully carbon neutral by 2030. Solar panels, less plastic, less waste, more trees. For many, it sounded radical. For him, it was spiritual. "We cannot preach care for the soul while ignoring the home that holds it," he declared. "The earth is God's gift. We must protect it." This wasn't theory for him. It came from a heartbreak he witnessed firsthand. In 1992, while visiting a village near the Amazon, he expected green canopies and birdsong. Instead, he found scorched earth, poisoned rivers, and children coughing from smoke-filled air. A little girl stood beside a charred tree stump and said, "We can't pray under the trees anymore. They're all gone." That image stayed with him. A child who had nowhere left to pray. Now, as Pope, he sees ecology not as politics, but as a moral mission. Because stained glass means nothing if the sky above it is dying. But what he did next challenged centuries of centralized authority and changed the very structure of power inside the Church. The sixth change was bold. Pope Leo began shifting real decision-making power away from Rome and into the hands of local churches. For centuries, nearly every major decision, liturgical, financial, even pastoral, had to pass through layers of Vatican bureaucracy. Not anymore. Under Pope Leo, local bishops were granted greater autonomy to respond to their communities in ways that made sense culturally and spiritually. Some Vatican insiders called it reckless, others called it long overdue. But Pope Leo had lived the alternative. In 1988, deep in the mountains of Peru, Father Robert served a remote parish without phones, internet, or any connection to Rome. At first, he was frustrated. Locals ran their own baptisms, music, even funeral rites, without official approval. But over time, he saw something beautiful, a church shaped not by command, but by compassion. One day, he asked an elder why they never sought help from Lima. The man smiled and said, "Because God already lives here. We just listen." Now, as Pope, he wants the global church to do the same. To listen, to trust, because sometimes the holiest voices aren't echoing from cathedrals, they're rising from the valleys. The seventh reform may be the most timely. In an age of conflict and division, Pope Leo is building bridges between faiths. He's launched interfaith councils in cities across the globe, bringing together Catholics, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and others to meet regularly, not to debate theology, but to serve the poor, promote peace, and foster understanding. During a press briefing, he said something unforgettable. Faith should not build walls, it should build tables. This belief was shaped in 1990, when he visited a refugee camp in northern Peru. It was filled with people of all backgrounds, some religious, some not. One afternoon, he sat beside a Muslim nurse after they treated a sick child. They prayed separately, in their own ways. Afterward, she turned to him and said, "We speak to God in different languages, but he hears the same pain." That moment never left him. Now, as Pope, he believes the future of faith depends on mutual respect. Silence between religions only creates fear, but dialogue creates hope. And in a world desperate for peace, Pope Leo is choosing the path of conversation over confrontation.